So it bears naming that courage isn't the absence of fear. The absence of fear is stupidity. Courage is when we feel fear and we choose to do what's right anyway. It's when our stomach is tied in knots, our hearts are tied in knots, and we find one next thing to do that might make a difference. So where does courage come from? For me, it comes from the words hanging on our walls, and most especially from this word right in front of me. Love is the source of courage, and not a fluffy hearts and flowers kind of love, but a fierce love that insists on justice. Those of you who attended the Light the Night vigil on Tuesday heard me talk about the importance of staying connected to love. I named that while we might be feeling all kinds of different feelings, anger, outrage, grief, fear, and anxiety, every one of them, everyone, grows out of love. When we feel angry, it's our psyche telling us that something is wrong. In this case, it's wrong that our government has deployed a quasi-military band of domestic terrorists against trans folk, people of color, immigrants, and anyone who refuses to toe the line. If we didn't love the people they're pulling out of cars and vanishing and shooting and pepper spraying and beating up, we would be able to turn a blind eye. We would be able to ignore what's going on. We can't ignore it because we care, because we love. We're outraged because it violates the ideals this nation was founded upon. We love those ideals, even as we acknowledge that they've never been fully realized. Grief grows out of love we've lost, and fear and anxiety are the logical response to what is now an existential threat to life on this planet. We love life. We love this world. And if we didn't, we wouldn't be frightened. The words themselves, our shared values, are important. And behind them is a community of people, both past and present, who've committed with me, with us, to let these words guide our choices. So the stories of our ancestors give me courage as well. Martha and Waitstill Sharp, who left their children with friends during World War II so that they could get refugees out of Europe. Estelle Griswold, who in 1961 was arrested for running a clinic that dispensed birth control in violation of Connecticut's laws prohibiting it. James Reeb, who was beaten to death during the Civil Rights Movement. Viola Liuzzo, who was shot at about the same time. All of these people, all ancestors of those of us in this room, spiritual ancestors, made huge sacrifices to bend the arc of the universe toward justice. Incidentally, the person who coined that phrase, bend the arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice, was a Unitarian minister named Theodore Parker. He was himself a leading member of the Boston Vigilance Committee, an underground group that helped hundreds of enslaved people find freedom, and who was known to write his sermons with a pistol on the desk because he'd been targeted so many times. It's not just ancestors from the past, but kinfolk here in the present. The stories out of Minneapolis give me courage. The way everyone from every walk of life and every political stripe, the way they're showing up to protect their neighbors is inspiring. Over 600 clergy people from all over the country, from all sorts of different faith communities, answered the call and braved dangerously cold temperatures in order to bear witness to what's going on there. I've been reading their accounts of what's happening, both the horrifying and the uplifting. My friend Marcia Stannard wrote, I answered a clergy call to Minneapolis, Minnesota on Wednesday. Yesterday, so many immigrant-owned businesses were closed on Lake Street, where ICE has been snatching people out of cars and gas stations, stores, and laundromats. Folks here are terrified, and neighbors are trying to help as best they can. I heard yesterday of a person who had to drop off breast milk because ICE snatched a mother from her home, leaving her 3-month baby alone. I spoke with a teacher in St. Paul about how ICE is hanging out in their school parking lot. The cruelty is the point, and the community care networks here in Minneapolis and St. Paul are doing heroic work trying to keep up with demand. Vance is mad because protesters entered a church, but ICE is snatching folks from churches and schools. Christiana Willie McKnight, who preached here once back before COVID, you might remember her if you were around back then, wrote, "I was born and raised in South Minneapolis. This city shaped me and I am filled with love for it. My mother still lives here. I am at her house right now. What I want you to know is that the city I am in right now looks and feels nothing like the city I have known my entire life. There are convoys of armed cars trolling through the streets, taking people from the bus stops. The churches have organized, everyone has organized, and we are providing food and support to people who are afraid to leave their homes. The community is responding in ways that are beautiful and astonishing to behold, and ICE is inflicting terrible injury to people and taking people everywhere, including 2 young people who were following them after they were worried for the safety of the clergy who were here yesterday. And this morning, ICE killed a man on East Street, where I used to go to lunch with my dad on the weekends." So that's the horrifying. Here's some uplifting. From Rebecca Savage, "This is what I learned from my time in Minnesota. The organizers put significant energy, thought, and care into the planning of the demonstrations, teaching, and leading. The over 1,000 clergy from around the country who answered the call were there to support local leaders and to learn how to take back to our areas what we've observed, experienced, and learned. It is so clear that there is a vast network of local organizers engaging on every level, providing mutual aid, witness, and legal observers. From the many restaurants and spaces I saw where piles of donations were at the ready to deliver to families that are afraid to leave their homes, to the omnipresent whistles and calls when federal agents arrive. Neighbors are caring for neighbors." At the airport on Friday morning, it was palpable, the power of faithful, prayerful witness, as over 100 multi-faith clergy knelt in the street, as planned and communicated to the officers on site, in the Arctic cold, and we sang, prayed, and shouted encouragements to them as they were arrested one by one. I saw each Minneapolis officer respectfully and carefully assist each clergy member up as they were led to the bus. There was no escalation. There was no violence. There was just bravery, courage, soulful presence, and witness. Many were in tears at this humble display of faith, clearly proclaiming that what is happening in Minnesota and around the country is morally and spiritually wrong and must stop. At the march on Friday, the people showed up by the thousands. I hear over 75,000. I was stunned to notice how many cases of hand warmers and feet warmers were being passed out, and how many people had entire trays of warm food for anyone to enjoy. I had hot samosas and tamales, aka a samosa of love, as we marched in the minus 20-degree frigid air. I also noticed that at every intersection, observers in yellow vests were facing out, protecting marchers along the route, and not a single officer was present, which, being a frequent DC March attendee, spoke volumes. We take care of us. All this to say, take the time to learn, take the time to organize, take the time to care, connect, and lean into community. This is not a one-off moment. The organizers and people, even now again grieving and raging, are continuing to lead many, many efforts. And this from Kristen Graschel-Schmidt. It has been an overwhelming privilege to bear witness to the ICE occupation in Minneapolis. I will never forget the sound of car horns and whistles announcing ICE's presence in neighborhoods, the fear that any moment could turn into a life or death situation. But here's my biggest takeaway. It turns out the strongest faith and resistance are both built simply on growing relationships with our neighbors and making sure the neighborhood's needs are met. Tactics can become complex, but it's the simple practice of caring for our neighbors that really helps communities make it through. Valerie Kaur, a Sikh participant in the action who spoke at the gathering of clergy, shared words that ring in my heart. You can arrest us, you can beat us, you can gun us down in the street, but you cannot end us. Because we are part of a song of love that began long ago with our ancestors and will only get louder. We are the majority. The more you come after us, the more we will grow. Because this movement is about more than resistance. We are practicing the world we want in the space between us. We are living into the dream of a world that is green and whole, safe and free, where I see your child as mine and you see mine as yours, and our dream is more powerful than your nightmare. That dream may be the most powerful source of courage there is. So if you are feeling horrified and heartbroken, it's time to act with courage. If you're feeling uplifted, it's time to act with courage. And I don't mean pick up a pitchfork and take to the streets. I mean look for ways to help your neighbor, to build connections, to develop relationships. Find ways to live our shared values that are accessible and meaningful to you and just a little bit outside of your comfort zone. Courage is a muscle, and if we are wise, we will take advantage of every opportunity we can to use it and make it stronger. Which doesn't mean we have to do all the things all the time. Remember what we talked about last week about staying focused, staying in flow. I thought long and hard about going to Minneapolis myself, but I kept coming to the conclusion that it wasn't mine to do. The time and energy it would have taken to get there would have kept me from meeting important commitments, like speaking at the Vigil on Tuesday and teaching an intensive on trauma to my colleagues in Albuquerque next week, which they desperately need and want. I did do brave things. I had an interview with a New York Times reporter, and I let the photographer take pictures of me, and I hadn't even brushed my hair. And it might surprise you, actually, to hear that every time I speak at a protest, I have that squiggly feeling in my tummy, in my heart. I'm stepping out of my comfort zone. So it does take courage. Courage that comes from my love for this community, for all of you. So whether you are called to be a weaver, a guide, an experimenter, a frontline responder, a visionary, a disruptor, a builder, a caregiver, a healer, or a storyteller, or maybe you're called to be something else entirely, but you are being called, and you'll continue to be called in ways that will require both courage and discernment. That's life. It's what it means to be human, especially in times like these. So listen to your heart. Listen for the call. Put your trust in the dream and yourselves and each other. So be it, and so may it be.